My name is Arron Kallenberg. I'm the founder and CEO of the Walt Alaskan Company.
Thank you. I am not known for my brevity, but I'm going to try to hand this off quickly. I wanted to ask everybody to please silence their cell phones, first and foremost. The second thing I wanted to say is a big round of applause to my sister, Haley Kallenberg, who's sitting there and coordinated this entire event. It's the first in a series called the Live Wild Educational Series. We hope to do more of these. We're going to be taking notes. We're going to be taking feedback from the community. We want to be doing more of these inside Alaska. This is our first one, and we'll be working out the kinks. We have an amazing panel here, and we hope to have more members of the community, as we persist with these type of events. Excuse me. Walt Alaskan Company is a public benefit corporation, so we have a public benefit purpose written into our corporate charter, and it allows us to not be bottom line focused. It allows us to focus on all of the stakeholders, so that's, of course, our shareholders, but also the community, the fish, our team members. And the public benefit purpose is based around two really simple yet complicated principles. The first one is creating access to sustainable Alaskan seafood for the domestic market primarily. It's really important to us that consumers have the ability to purchase fish in America. And the second is around creating awareness for sustainable seafood. So we have this dual purpose in our charter where people need to have access to the fish and they need to have awareness that they can, choose this fish in the market. And as Walt Alaskan has grown, we're up to close to 150 employees now. We sell fish in every state, and it's become incredibly important that our sphere of influence in the market and in Alaska never becomes bigger than our sphere of concern. And as companies grow, that can be difficult. And since we're a public benefit corporation, we have this mandate. And so we are investing here with these type of forums in our own education. We have many members and team members here. We're looking to learn. We're looking to listen. We're looking to be responsible stewards of the fisheries in Alaska. And I always say, Walt Alaskan doesn't need to get any bigger for its own sake. It's already grown beyond my wildest dreams. We're doing this so that we can accelerate humanity's transition to sustainable food systems by fostering meaningful, interconnected relationships between human beings, wild seafood, and the planet. And I call those the 3 Ps: people, place, and plate. And that's the only direction that we've really given this group of panelists today is let's talk about the people that make this fishery, the fisheries and the industry possible, supply chain, the communities that are affected, Homer and beyond in Alaska. Let's talk about the place, Alaska, the ecology, and let's talk about the fish. I just wanted to leave you all with one thing. Like I said, I'm not trying to eat at everybody's time. Many of you know my father, my sister and I's father passed away 2 weeks ago today, and he was instrumental in guiding us. He was our rudder, he was our North Star, he was our compass. And when we had he was a lifelong Bristol Bay commercial fisherman, grew up fishing with his father, our grandfather, who started fishing in the sailboat days. He also served as the chairman of the Territorial Board of Fisheries and wrote his master's thesis on conservation of Bristol Bay red salmon with an emphasis on teaching. He was also a school teacher. So our mandate about awareness and market come from 3 generations in Alaska, and we did just unfortunately lose my father. I just wanted to leave you with 2 things that he always said. He said the most important thing was to be life positive. He always used this term, life positive, and I think that that's such a great term when we think about how we incorporate the fisheries in Alaska into the greater global ecosystem and market. And the other thing that he always said, and we're putting this into our perpetual purpose trust is try not to do anything that looks too stupid 10,000 years from now. And, you know, Alaska is the global gold standard for sustainable fisheries management, but it didn't get that way overnight. And as we all know, there's been many missteps and arguments and discussions, and I think that public discourse is so important in Alaska and in the communities. You know, and of course we're going to make mistakes, but the most important thing is not to do anything that looks too stupid 10,000 years from now, and that's why, in my dad's honor, you know, we're continuing this legacy, and we're here to learn, we're here to listen, we're here to be humble. We do not believe we have all the answers. We're looking to iterate. Yes, we're going to make mistakes, but you know what I've learned more than anything over the last couple of weeks is you don't get to take any of this with you. It's only what you leave behind for others. And Alaska has such a rich public resource that could persist for generations and generations and generations if we just don't do anything that looks too stupid 10,000 years from now. And I think that requires community engagement, dialogue, face-to-face, you know, people, place, and plate. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Terry. I could probably flash some lights here. Terry Haines is our moderator here. He'll be kicking it off and introducing the rest of the folks. But thank you everyone for attending. Enjoy and live wild.
Well, thank you, Arron, and thank you, Walt Alaska Company, and thank all of you for coming here to join us for a conversation on the future of sustainable seafood in Alaska. And thanks to our esteemed panel for spending their valuable time with us here this evening. Here joining us tonight are Everette Anderson at the end there. Everette is Vice President and Director of Fisheries Policy for the Bristol Bay Native Corporation. Seated next to Everette is Nels Ure. Nels is the Bristol Bay Fisherman and Communications Director at the Commercial Fisherman of Bristol Bay. Another acronym, I'm going to try not to mess that up. Seated next to Nels is Melanie Brown. Melanie is Outreach Director at Salmon State and the Bristol Bay Salmon Fisherman. Next to Melanie is Sue Mauger. Sue is the Science Director at Inletkeeper. And Scott Sandvig, next to Sue, is the Vice President and Value-Added Sales at Alaska Leader Seafoods. And finally, we have Stefanie Moreland. She's the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs for Trident Seafoods. Thank you all for joining us here this evening. And each of you brings a different perspective to the table. Let's start out the conversation with a few words about what you, our panelists, see and think about the future of sustainable fisheries in Alaska. What does that look like to you, beginning with Everette?
Well, I'm going to start off with practicing my native language. Janai Waka Janajit Huina Everette Anderson, Vice President and Director of Fisheries Policy. First and foremost, I'm a Togiak travel member from Dillingham, Alaska, which is about 250 miles west of here, at the heart of the largest wild sockeye salmon fishery on the planet. And many of us get to enjoy that quite a bit. I think before I get to that question, maybe I have so many different rabbit holes I want to go down, but I'm going to try and contain some of my initial comments. But I really think it's about, when I was asked to be a part of this panel, it was a couple different reasons. One, I am a tribal member. My first memory of fish was pulling a Chinook off the beach of Snake Point, which is where Togiak River and Wood River meet. That's my first memory. That was pulling a Chinook out of the water for food purposes. My dad, his grandfather, fished on sailboats in Bristol Bay. They commercially fished, but it was always first subsistence. And so the corporation I represent is Alaskan Native Corporation. How many of you are aware of ANCs? And again, there's a lot of acronyms that we all deal with, but I'm not going to go into the minutia of the formation of the Alaskan Native Corporation during the passage of the Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act. But we have a fish first policy at the Bristol Bay Native Corporation, which can take on a number of different meanings. We also have protecting our native way of life. We have one of our mission statement is enriching our native way of life. But the connection that takes us right back all the time is seafood, year in, year out. And some of the topics that we may talk about are challenging. I want to thank Arron and Haley and Walt Alaskan Company and the broader family for creating this stage to have this conversation, because they're not easy. We have a lot of multiple stakeholders. Some of them you see up here on this panel, and there's many more across the state. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have the conversation. So I'm really, really appreciative of the fact that you all are here. Some of you are part of the WAC team. Some of you are residents. Some of you are fishermen. And all NSC representatives are Vance and the others. So, I mean, that helps you to have this full, broad spectrum of participants in collectively addressing a very, very important issue. So that first Chinook that I pulled off the beach when I was probably 4 years old became even more important a couple years back when the Nishigack River system became known as the Chinook salmon as a stock of concern. And so when I think about what that means for my 8-year-old daughter, or if my older children decide to have their kids and we have grandkids, are we doing enough now to ensure that we have sustainable seafood for future generations? So I'm here to collaborate with all of you to figure out how we address this so that we're protecting a way of life, culture, traditions, commercial use, the beauty of our state. So I'll stop there and then pass it to Nels, and then hopefully we can get to some more of these different topics.
That was smooth, right as the mic dies. Testing. Okay, well, I guess we'll just do it this way then. My name is Nels Ure. I spent the first few years of my life in Naknek until my family moved to Kodiak. I grew up in Kodiak and did my K-12 education there, but by the time I was 14, I was able to start commercially fishing on my father's drift vessel in Bristol Bay. If you would have asked me at 14 if I wanted to be on a boat, I would have said no. If you would have asked me at 15 and 16, I probably still would have said no. But as the years went on, I really grew a fondness and enjoyment for the time that I got to spend with my family harvesting salmon. As I kind of moved through my young adult life, I started to think about all these ways that salmon sustained me. And then I started to think about how they sustained other parts of our life in Alaska, whether that was the local cultures, whether that was indigenous cultures, whether that was the economy, whether that was how it affects us socially too. And all of a sudden I found myself running a campaign to beat another person to be on a board because he was neutral on Pebble Mine. And that's what really just, I guess, started my work in understanding and advocating for sustainable fisheries. I think I'll just leave it there for now, and I'll pass it to Melanie Brown.
Thank you. I guess you could say my life is centered around salmon, wild salmon. So I view sustainability through the lens of wild salmon. And I feel like they're, even if I wasn't brought into a salmon life with my family as a commercial fisherman in Bristol Bay, I think I would have recognized anyways that salmon are an amazing way to view sustainability because of their life cycle, because they're a thread needle between the terrestrial space, the land space, and the ocean space. And they also tie people together in a beautiful way and tie people to the land. keep their eyes on the ocean and the completion of the life cycle. And all the places that salmon swim are necessary for their continuance. And the health of salmon also is indicative of the health of our earth and us as humans and how we're treating the earth. And so I guess my view on sustainability is that if the salmon are doing well, then we're doing right by the future of salmon. And the work that I do, I do it because I want salmon to continue so far into the future that all of us are forgotten. And, people are, I want to see a future where people are being able to live rich salmon lives in our amazing state. And just so much time has passed that nobody knows about this time where we are recognizing the finiteness of the systems. We're starting to see indications with certain species. The sockeye in Bristol Bay are doing really well. We've been able to enjoy really, really strong returns in Bristol Bay, but there are systems, the Yukon and the Kuskokwim rivers, I would be remiss in not bringing them up. And the fact that the life cycle of Chinook and chums are clearly being disrupted somewhere in the system. And we need to figure out how to reverse that so that the people of the upriver communities and the coastal communities that rely on the salmon to fully participate in their cultures and connectedness to this land as Indigenous peoples can continue. And I really believe that as long as Alaska's first people are taken care of and they are getting the salmon that they want and need and have a relationship with, that means that everybody else that is involved in the salmon marketplace or harvesting salmon are doing well too. And I think that is the mark that we all need to shoot for the future and sustainability of salmon, which are an indicator of the complete ocean health, in my opinion.
I've been in Alaska 25 years, and I came from the East Coast on a landscape that I didn't understand was a salmon landscape long ago, and that the streams in New England used to be full with salmon. And then I moved to Oregon, and it was like I was in the middle of a bit of a post-traumatic stress environment where people were they had lost the salmon, and they were desperately trying to find ways to recover them. And when I moved to Alaska, there was this sort of sigh of relief of finally I've made it to a salmon landscape that's still thriving, and these communities are relying and subsisting off of these fish. And what I've learned in the following 25 years is that having salmon is a choice. It's a choice that has to be made every day by Alaskans all across the state. It's decisions about whether the Pebble Mine is the direction that we want to go for Bristol Bay. It's a decision in the Kuskokwim around the Donlin Mine. It's about local communities making decisions about stormwater and road development. That we have to make these choices constantly. It isn't just a big Supreme Court decision that will decide the fate of Alaska salmon. It is daily decisions by people all over the state. I have, in some ways, the privilege of speaking for the habitat, in that I work for a nonprofit entity, community-based. We really try to be paying attention to what people are concerned about, and we have tried really hard to be the voice for clean water and healthy salmon habitat, so that everyone has the opportunity to enjoy salmon, so that we continue to have thriving subsistence communities, but that we can also have larger scale commercial fisheries. I'm a personal and sport fisher person, and all of those are a big part of the Alaskan way of life. And I would say that Alaska has been very successful in its fisheries management, in large part because we have such a large land area and so few people, so few impacts to our habitat. We certainly do not have pristine habitat. I don't think pristine exists anywhere in the world anymore, because we are all having an impact on the climate around the world. And as we go further into some of these questions, that's sort of where my expertise sits, in the science of freshwater ecology and how our salmon habitat is changing within our watersheds, and definitely has my eyes wide open to the choices that we need to make if we're not going to be looking really stupid in 100,000 years.
My name is Scott Sandvig, and I'm the Vice President of Value-Added Sales for Alaskan Leader Seafoods. Alaskan Leader owns and operates 4 freezer longline cod vessels in the Bering Sea, so my expertise is a little more on cod, particularly in the ground fish in Bering Sea. We are still owned and operated by the 7 fishing families that started the company in 1991 out of Kodiak, Alaska. They built the first vessel, the Alaskan Leader. And then in 96, 97, we merged with one of the 6 CDQ groups in Alaska called Bristol Bay Economic Development Corporation. So it's a very strategic partner for us. They bring additional quota to the table, but also allows us to not only take the resource out of Alaska, but bring a major percentage of our profits back to the rural watershed region of Bristol Bay. My team's tasked with taking our frozen to sea longline H&G from our vessels. We bring it down, we process it into marketable products, skinless, boneless fillets, retail packaging, marinades, battered, breaded, and then particularly for Wild Alaskan Company, we do the 6-ounce skinless, boneless cod loin. So that's a great item that we are very proud of to be producing for you guys here in the audience. I think sustainability to me, it really means everything for not only our company, but when we go to market, I kind of have a different viewpoint on the sales side of things. How do we sell it? How do we brand it? How do we get a competitive advantage on such a complicated international global seafood landscape? So be not only sustainable for fishing for years to come, but communicating that message is so important when we're talking to our customer base. And I'm just excited to be here because Wild Alaskan Company has created an amazing platform to communicate that message even further downstream on a B2C basis, which, you know, for us on the commercial fishing side, the processing side, it's so much B2B, business to business. And then you rely on your customers and how do they communicate the message at retail, in a restaurant chain. So for Wild Alaskan Company, it's just so important that you guys have not only, you know, the best sustainable seafood at your fingertips and going to market, but communicating that message, that brand, that, you know, all of us, all the stakeholders in Alaska, you know, coming together to make sure that we're not the ones catching the last fish. And we want to be part of the solution to make sure that, as Arron said, you know, we're not doing stupid things 10,000 years from now. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you all for being here and for your interest and a wide-ranging discussion that I expect for us to have tonight. From a Trident Seafoods perspective, sustainability is an investment in our future. We hold ourselves accountable to a multi-stakeholder model, and so it's not just about the health of our company, but we're not successful unless all of our stakeholders are successful, and that includes having healthy harvesters. It includes a productive ecosystem that many rely on. It requires healthy communities to support the infrastructure that it takes to support the economies that provide longevity for families to be in these coastal remote communities, many of which are not on road systems, to want to participate and continue to participate even in the public forums where fisheries management is really governed and set, being able to sustain their long-term business opportunities. Wild Alaskan Company has opportunity to really help drive value in Alaska seafood, and that is critical for us being able to fuel everything that it takes to be able to get the fish to market and be able to continue to do really unique activities that Alaska is known for in order to advance science and responsiveness and responsible conservation measures. So sustainability is an investment in our future, and it's something that we all require for any of us to be successful.
Thank you, Stephanie, and I think we've got this working again. We're going to try it again with Everett. Don't break it. Like that. Thanks, everybody. Well, my follow-up question will hopefully allow you to get into the weeds a little. You know, Arron mentioned that we're all in it together. You know, we're all here under one umbrella, and that's to have a sustainable future for Alaska fisheries. But we have challenges on the horizon, and some of them seem pretty significant. The North Pacific Fishery Management Council recently had a climate scenarios workshop in which they presented a lot of evidence that showed us that the fisheries management system that we've been depending on for science-based management that's been the gold standard worldwide probably won't work anymore, because the long data sets that go back a long ways that we use to predict the future aren't going to work anymore, because the future is completely different now. We can't use the past to predict the future anymore. And so we are seeing we see management decisions made about snow crab and Pacific cod that were wildly wrong. And those crashes of those stocks surprised our management system. At the same time, we have a global environment in which we see prices go down drastically. Our market has been eroded. Russia is notably dumping fish onto the market that's cheap and possibly not sustainably harvested. What can we do to change all that and to bring about a sustainable future as far as changes that we can make in our fisheries management system, and how can we influence the global markets so that we can once again have a good value price for our product?
Whoa, that's
That should be the last question I have to ask.
there's a lot of different ways to go there. Let me add a little more about context. Sorry, Arron, I'm going to tell this story, but there's a very peculiar nexus between the Anderson family and the Kallenberg family, where your grandfather was my dad's teacher in Territorial High School in Dillingham. So it's really interesting to come back to this full circle, kind of like Salmon do, where we get an opportunity to engage at this level. And I guess broadly speaking, it's this stage right here, all of you taking time to listen to the multiple aspects of at least 5 stakeholders here about what these particular issues mean for us as different groups or individuals, but being able to have an opportunity to speak freely about how things can change as we move into the future. And I believe it's engagement. I believe it's education. We were talking about false information earlier. Being able to come to those of us that may have answers, and if we don't, we provide those particular individuals that may give you some of the facts that you're looking for to help you do your job, or be more of a participant in what it means to you to make sure that systems, whether it's North Pacific Council or Board of Fish or regional advisory committees for subsistence users, there's multiple ways to engage in this, but I think it all starts with trying to not point fingers at each other, but really kind of pull simultaneously in the same direction. And it's going to be hard for a little bit to get to that point. I wanted to add a little bit more context also about place. We have a good family friend, Dr. Kristen Barnett. She's an archaeologist. She's also a Bristol Bay Native Corporation shareholder. But a lot of her work has been trying to identify how long our people in Western Alaska, and in particular Togiak, which is further west of Dillingham, about 60 miles, how long they've been there. The presence, place, continuous presence. And she just completed some field work earlier this month, and she shared some of the initial information about place. And it's remarkable. And again, I've read different articles about people being in certain areas in a part of the world for thousands of years, but this is literally right in our backyard. And to see that some of the findings, the belongings, the artifacts of former ancestors, they may have been my relatives, I don't know, but to find that there's herring bones, halibut bones, Pacific cod bones, and salmon bones that have been there for at least 1,300 years. And when I heard her tell me that, I'm thinking, well, I mean, I kind of grew up knowing that that's been a part of my life, but it's literally been thousands of years, and they're going to do some more sequencing of the information and data, and it could be older than that. I guess I share that with you because as you're working with these different species from different parts of the state, or fish that are being harvested in the federal waters versus the state waters, there's a story, there's a connection, there's a link back to an origin, a home. And whether you take that or however you promote or market or talk about that with your particular customers, I think it's just really important to know that there are multiple stakeholders that have been around for thousands of years that have relied on this as a food source, a subsistence way of life. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. The role that I play at BBNC is also part of the, I'm the Fisheries Policy Director, and that really means engaging in the council process, Board of Fish, working with congressional delegation, working with state representatives, working with Washington delegation, others that will, engage with us on what it means to have a sustainable seafood future, to meet not just our subsistence needs, but also our investment, similar to what Scott said. BBNC also has an investment in the longline cod, Pacific cod sector in BSAI. We have 9 vessels we harvest and process on board. So we have this dual purpose on making sure that we're protecting our 31 communities and those shareholders that reside in the region and other residents of those 31 villages in the Bristol Bay region, that they are getting what they need. And so that requires this balance of making sure that our investments are being taken care of and managed appropriately, and doing what they need to do to be successful, but simultaneously making sure that we're advocating for them and doing what we can to ensure that the fish do continue to return home. And so what does that mean? Well, there's multiple layers, and I'm going to stop in 1 second, I promise, about how we get there. Because when I said earlier about pointing fingers, I really think we're beyond that. We really have to do like we're doing now and have a conversation about what's important to you, and then how do we all get there together? Because at the end of the day, we ultimately all have something to lose, and that is seafood. We'll lose salmon if we're not trying to solve these individual siloed operations or businesses that are part of this bigger ecosystem.
after going through the introductions, once the mic fizzled out, so did all the wonderful things that I wanted to tell you guys. But I need to give you a little bit more context about what I do, because I don't think I did a good job at that in the introduction. So I was a past BBRSDA board member, and that got me involved in the world of fish and realizing how inherently political fish can be. Sometimes it seems that it's as simple as setting the net and picking the fish, and oh boy, I wish I would have taken that route, but I decided to get into the trenches and do work that I thought was meaningful to me, and a lot of that work started with the proposed Pebble Mine. And how many people in this room have heard about Pebble Mine? Show of hands. Okay, it's pretty much everyone. For those of you who don't know, find me afterward and I'll talk your ear off. But basically what this proposed mine did in the Bristol Bay region, and what I think one of the best outcomes of that fight was it really unified a lot of different fish stakeholders. It unified fishermen, it unified sports fishermen, it unified tribes, businesses, industry members, all because we realized, as Everette said, we had something very, very important, something that's integral to so many lifeways, so many people's being, that we recognized if we lost that, we would not be who we are. So the fight has gone on, and many people wonder, is Pebble still a thing? Because we've won many battles. We've lost a few too along the way, but as I've spent time with the WAC team these last couple of days, one of these values that's up on the wall in the breakfast room is staying scrappy. And I really like that, because when I think about the future of sustainable fish, we have to stay scrappy. We have to be able to think outside the box. We have to be able to think differently. We have to be able to unify. We have to be able to do what so many various stakeholders who we never thought could work together in the Pebble fight did for that. I also have to say that we still do have a battle that is ongoing out in Bristol Bay. We're very fortunate that last year, and in January of 2023, we received 404C Clean Water Act protections from the EPA, and that was over a decade of tribes and fishermen, sports entities working together, advocating, collecting letters nationally. It was all of us being scrappy. And when we think about sustainable fisheries, we do need to bridge these gaps. We do need to figure out who can we bring into the fold that will also help work with us to find this common goal. And so I think to answer Terry's question, which is way too difficult to answer, I think that a good future to start with sustainable fisheries is looking local and looking at what some of your local costs are. What are issues in your direct community or in the direct fishing community if you're a fisherman that you can work towards, because those small steps make a very big difference. And I think Bristol Bay has really shown that, because it was a lot of small steps to make this huge change. And we're still fighting the good fight. And we always will, because at the end of the day, salmon are what make us who we are. It's what make us fishermen. It's what make us Alaskan. It's our social fabric. And so I'll pass it to Melanie after that.
Thanks, Nels. So I guess I'm going to segue by kind of cusping a little bit with Nels by saying it's really important to pay attention and participate when you see an opportunity. There's so many angles to look at this stuff from, and the policy side of things is sometimes a really important place to engage. And something that is just now coming out that I think is a great opportunity is the Domestic Seafood Production Act that Mary Peltola just dropped. It's a bill she just dropped, and I think that if people are paying attention, talking to their lawmakers, it could really shape this bill in a good way. And Arron, I've heard Arron talk a number of times in the past couple days about salmon are not a commodity. Fish should not be treated as a commodity. They're precious creatures that nurture us. And that is the way that I think we need to shape our thinking around fish. Sure, they, you know, for those of us who harvest as fishermen, they help support our lives. There's the money side of things. The reality is we need money to live. But I think that, you know, when we're thinking in terms of quantity over quality and exporting in really large numbers, it takes the true value of the fish as food out of the picture, even though it is being sent out as food. We lose sight of the fact that it's not just a money driver. It really is. It's something that we all need. Food is fundamental to all of us, and I think if we started leading with that, it could help improve conditions for the future sustainability of all the fish in the sea. But I also recognize that, like, in terms of market product forms, I think we all need to learn to be more facile and quick-footed about shifting gears when we need to. You know, we're in a situation now where we're seeing fish come back early for some reason, and everybody's like, what are we supposed to do with a fish this size? Oh my gosh. Because the cutting machines aren't they don't fit the size of the fish that are coming in, but and I know it's easier said than done, especially when you're dealing with a really hard and fast season like Bristol Bay. You know, the fish just come in all at once, and everybody's like, where are we gonna put them all? Oh my gosh, you know? And so we end up falling into this trap of cutting the heads off, gutting them, and shipping them overseas instead of producing our own fish. And then we re-import them and they're no longer a U.S. product. And the Domestic Seafood Production Act is intended to lessen that gap, the import-export gap. But if we could find ways to make cutting cool, we could come up with all kinds of amazing products. And not just fillets. You know, fillets are great. You know, they're a gentle way for the consumer to experience a nice piece of fish. But in my opinion, the best parts of the fish are like right here, behind the collar. That nice piece of fat above the backbone, the belly pieces. And so many people never even get to experience those parts. But if consumers could be educated in a way to know how to handle a fish tip to tail and make all kinds of culinary delights in their own kitchens, you know, that I feel like that not only is instilling really good values in consumers and by not wasting the precious fish that we are given, but also just enriching themselves and the possibilities of, you know, the different foods that people could be making for themselves and their friends and family. And let me see. I think I covered most of what I meant to, and I do believe that these are things that could improve the pricing if we're, and decommodify seafood.
I was noticing that both Melanie and I have our fish earrings on. I don't work in the deep work of seafood marketing and processing. I come at this discussion as someone who has really fallen in love with the complexity of our salmon systems. I do tend to be a little salmon-centric, so apologies to the cod. But I think salmon are fascinating because they do so utilize our marine environment, but then they intersect with our human footprint so deeply in our watersheds and are very complex in their life histories, which is what makes them so resilient given half a chance. And I feel like our human systems and our way of managing salmon have become as complex as the salmon life cycle, with all of our different boards and escapements in different systems, and that we get very we have a lot of blinders on, I think, in a lot of the decision making that happens. Like, we have very specific goals we're trying to reach as a fisheries biologist or as a manager at a regional scale. And ultimately, if we are going to have sustainable seafood, that has to be part of a larger vision and strategy that overlaps all the other sectors that are going on. So, we have a lot of pressure right now, finally, to really begin to shift our energy dynamic in Alaska. And that is going to require a lot of metals that have now given a whole voice to a whole new mining industry. And if those additional sectors are not also committed to sustainable fisheries, then they're not going to be making any choices that allow this sector to be successful. And so, as complicated as the fisheries management and policy world is right now, I think it actually needs to get even more complicated, because it needs to be much more deeply integrated and overlapping with all the other decision making going on about the future of Alaska and our landscape. That the decisions about our energy future will very much dictate whether we have sustainable fisheries in the future. And if we're not deeply engaged beyond our comfort zone of fisheries, and scientists are particularly terrible at this. I go to meetings with a bunch of freshwater fisheries experts, but I don't necessarily go to the marine science experts, and we don't overlap super well. We're trying to work on that, but I think we all have to broaden our reach of who we engage with and influence, because if the vision is not the same, then we're never going to end up there. So I encourage everyone who has this vision of sustainability that your sphere of influence needs to encompass perhaps many more than you are already touching, because decisions are being made that will directly work against your vision. I forgot what the question was.
I think the question is, what can we do to, continue sustainable fisheries for the future? Something like that. So I think a couple points, again, from my point of view, on the Alaska cod side, but overarching all Alaska seafood, for us, we're based on a quota-based system in the Bering Sea, and it's all primarily science-based, driven on stock assessment surveys. So one of the things we can do is increase our stock assessment surveys, or how we're doing those surveys, how frequently we're doing them. And I think that's going to take additional funds and capital to do that. But the more we know, the more we can make better decisions for the future. So I think that'd be one piece. Again, that'd be a political, legislative. But the more we can do surveys, the more we can get our hands into those fisheries and take a look at. I think that's going to help the future in making decision processes. Another thing that I found interesting, I think that from our company side, how can the fishing community and industry work together with the science? Using our data, we get daily fishing reports, what sizes were coming on board, where were we fishing, how good was it, what time of the year, all these things, and all that data is tracked on our vessels. So how can we incorporate that data into the science, into the modeling that then ultimately makes recommendations to the council? And I don't think that's happening enough. Terry mentioned about, competing on the global market, and I just want to touch base on that a little bit. I think for us, telling the story, it just could not be more important. We do have some of the best managed fisheries in the world. We are the gold standard in the North Pacific. But how do we tell that story? When we go into the marketplace, into any kind of retailer, the competition is vast. There are sustainable fisheries out there, Norwegian cod, Icelandic cod. Some of the Russian fisheries, are deemed sustainable. So how do we compete in that marketplace? So I think for us, it's the storytelling. There's thousands of stories to be told, from Alaska, and we've heard a lot already. And I think it's also going further. Sustainability is not enough. It's traceability now. It's the next big buzzword in the marketplace. How can we trace our fish back? Again, ultimately telling a story. And then on top of that, USA production, packaging. How is your packaging recyclable? Tell that story. Logistics. What's your carbon footprint? There's just so much more to it than just the basis of sustainable fisheries. And I think that's the way we're going to compete. That's the way we're going to get a higher value, as we were talking about a little bit of the fish price, because there's so many operators in here. We all know that operating is not going down. The costs are not going down. So how do we get more of a return in value for our Alaska-based fisheries? And in order to do that, we have to go into the marketplace. We have to tell that story the best we can, and make sure that we are at the cutting edge of not only sustainability, traceability, packaging, logistics, you name it, and give the consumer a real reason to pay top dollar for our product.
Agree with so much of what's been said, but I think just want to touch on, where Terry was going with adaptation, climate resilience. What we expect and what we know is there are changing ocean conditions, and we would expect those changes to occur at a more rapid pace, so greater frequency and greater variability going forward, which means we expect in wild capture fisheries to see more change. We know what it takes in order to responsibly manage, even under variation. We know to buffer catch limits for scientific uncertainty, management uncertainty. We know to look at ecosystem indicators and try to incorporate those into our assessment methods. We've got really good framework and practices, accountability, observation, monitoring, tremendous information in Alaska region, above and beyond what many other areas around the world have integrated. They're really starting from a much more data poor environment than we are, so we're fortunate, we're ahead, we're being looked to at how we can build greater adaptation and climate resilience into fisheries management in the Alaska region. So there's really good work underway. We have to go faster, and we need it to be funded. We need to ensure that we're all united in ensuring that we continue to invest in marine surveys. That funding is under threat. Wild capture fisheries are really a public resource, and it's important that we continue to maintain public interest in monitoring what's going on, ensuring we're understanding what's happening in our ecosystems, and ensuring that we have that information in order to quickly adapt. We've had a success story in the Gulf of Alaska with respect to catching the effect of a heat wave on Pacific cod, us detecting that through marine surveys, and then we already had management measures ready to roll in terms of knowing we have to close directed fishery. We have to take action that is swift in response to this very temporary short-term effect. And that occurred, and there's been a response since in terms of that stock. That's what we would expect. And so we have a lot of knowledge to take advantage of. We also need to deepen that with respect to understanding predator-prey relationships and what's happening, again, across the ecosystem, and the point that Melanie made, gravel to gravel for salmon or anadromous fish. With respect to competitiveness, Scott is right on in talking about value. What we do is expensive. We are in a remote environment, and we are highly regulated, and we also self-impose things that are costly in order to ensure we've got a strong future and sustainable and responsible practices. So cost of energy and ensuring we have responsible planning for energy is important. There's a tremendous opportunity in the state right now to support green energy, low carbon contributions that also would lend to affordable energy in remote areas. There's hydro in Southeast Alaska and renewable energies in Kodiak. There's potential opportunity for geothermal in Dutch Harbor. We don't talk about that in the fishing sector, and we should, because it would really enhance already what is a blue protein and a low carbon protein relative to land-based. So lots of opportunity to actually highlight what has been a burden and a cost in this sector, be able to highlight it as really a value, and further investment in responsible practices going forward, a differentiator. If we fail to do that and people just make decisions off of cost, you end up really sourcing, people would end up accepting fish that doesn't have this investment in responsible practices, and certainly supply chain practices are in question with respect to environmental footprint and social impact.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, everybody. Well, Sue mentioned that scientists don't necessarily talk to one another outside of their focus, their areas of focus. And we've been learning that our siloed methods of fisheries management, that is one species at a time, has its limitations when it comes to not recognizing clues in the ecosystem that we may have noticed with snow crab, for instance, or Pacific cod, but they went unnoticed because we don't have an ecosystem-based fisheries management system right now. How important is it to transition to an ecosystem-based fisheries management system, and what will that take? I know that we're looking at some funds that have come down through things like the Build Back Better funds that were used for some fisheries research, but fisheries research has generally been tough to find money for, and money that we get from seafood import taxes, which was meant mostly to go to Salt and Stall Kennedy grants that would help the fishery industry grow and compete globally, has been used for fisheries research. How do we get that knowledge and the research that we need, and what knowledge and research do we need, and what do we need to know to go forward, and how do we transition to an ecosystem-based fisheries management system?
Well, I pass. Okay. I'm going to do the best of my ability to answer this question with just the limited experience I have. In the line of work that I have done, which is a lot of social activism or engagement with the public on important issues, it's for the average Joe or for the mom and pop, just for the average citizen, it is calling your legislators and asking for funding. I mean, it's public support for these things as well, and also it's public education that we need. And so that is my very simple answer to your very complex question, and I digress.
Okay. Yeah, this is a big question. And thanks for asking it. Ecosystem-based management is necessary. NOAA states that is where they want to be, what they want to be doing. But there are things that are happening in the ocean space that I think contradict that goal. And one of the things that drives me crazy is things like MSC certification, because in my opinion, there are certain fisheries that I think if they were actually looking through the lens of ecosystem-based management, they would not be certified. And in my opinion, these certifications are simply just subscriptions, and ways for people to just sort of like feel better about themselves,
What fisheries? What fisheries?
The fisheries that are bycatching Chinook, the fisheries that are bycatching chum,
The trawlers?
the fisheries that are bycatching halibut, and catching orcas in their gear.
What fisheries are those?
I'm trying to play nice up here.
Well, you guys are our fearless leaders, and the experts, so lead us.
We will have time for questions at the end.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm just like, MSC, like, no, you don't get to give people these passes and make them feel really good about their purchases, you know, because you put this label on the package, or somebody's allowed to put this label on their package because their fishery is certified by MSC. And I brought that up because I think it contradicts the concept of ecosystem-based management. Yeah, so I feel like I just dropped a big bomb of poop everywhere in this room. So I'm just gonna.
Well, I'm gonna drop a little more too. I think we're seeing, there are a few issues that have a lot of people concerned. One is the trawl bycatch, and another, and I consider these as symptoms of our lack of ecosystem management. We also have a long history of hatcheries in the state, and unless we truly understand their ecosystem impact, we don't really understand what putting millions and millions and millions of fish into the system do. And there just isn't a lot of willingness to be super transparent about it, and that there's a lot of like historical identity attached to hatcheries, and there's, I think, also with the trawlers, this sense of, you know, who they are and what they do, and that gets in the way of being really honest about the problems. And these are just the symptoms, and we will see more of this. We will see more collapses in places because we haven't done a full accounting of the whole system. And it is really challenging work. I mean, to really understand these systems is probably billions of dollars of research, which is probably unlikely to drop at our feet. But we really do not understand our marine systems, the movement of fish, the movement of nutrients through that cycle. And then when we add the climate layer, we don't understand how those things are going to change. And if we don't have honest brokers and our partners in the fisheries work, then we're really, I don't think, on a very good path. And so I think someone with a lot more knowledge about the trawler stuff can talk about that, but I do think that those are symptoms of us really not understanding the bigger picture in these fisheries, and it's to our detriment, to all our detriment. So I appreciate those who have been really strong advocates in these spaces to draw attention. Social media is quite an amazing platform and has really brought some of these issues to the forefront for people who really didn't know that we had a problem. But now it's time for that social pressure to intersect with our policy sector and for us to actually get some real work done.
I think this question is probably a little more above me and what I do every day, but I just want to say that I think kind of to the point is that all the fisheries are connected. You know, whatever's happening in the Bering Sea can certainly affect the Southeast, can affect the Gulf, and we got to be together in a united front. I mean, the Alaska seafood brand is so powerful. So many years have been put into building that brand and bringing it to market, and like I mentioned earlier, making sure we're getting the highest value for our fish. So, you know, having it all be looked at as a more interconnected way, I think is, you know, positive. But certainly we are all in this together as an Alaska seafood brand, and what can hurt one fishery can certainly hurt another. Even going, kind of taking a step back to the Pebble Mine part, you know, if that had gone through and affected the Alaska sockeye, that would affect the Alaska cod, it could affect the Alaska paw, it could affect everything else downstream. It was just sockeye was kind of right on the beach, the first part of it, but it's going to, you know, delinder into the rest of the fishery. So I'm definitely a believer everything is connected. So I hope that, things can be looked at that in a positive way and be together on the united what's best for the Alaska seafood brand.
I think it's clear that we need to share information more effectively. I think with respect to many of the issues that have been raised here, that there's a lot of really positive action that has happened in Alaska and a lot of strong leadership with respect to the management practices that we have in place, including high level of transparency and accountability and data on what's happening on the grounds with fishing, and also really fantastic information from marine surveys and ecosystem understanding. There's a lot more that can be done and to do in terms of bringing those data into actionable form, but I'm very excited about the ecosystem work that's being done in Alaska, and also about the climate adaptation work that's being done in Alaska that is leading relative to other regions in the United States, and the United States is leading relative to other regions globally. So there's great work being done, and clearly we're not getting that message out in a clear way. It's not as accessible as it needs to be. With respect to some of the other issues raised here, and understanding impacts on hatchery fish interaction with other salmon, with ecosystem broadly. I think stakeholders within these fisheries agree that we need to have accountability. The industry and government joined forces in funding a $20 million long-term research project on hatcheries, and those results are coming out. It's very impressive cutting-edge research with respect to looking at effects on productivity, fecundity, strain. So I think a lot of hot topics that are really emerging and becoming important in terms of public interest in particularly in Alaska are topics that there is more information on, and we've got to get smarter about how to get that information in people's hands, so that we're really working on solving conservation problems and addressing forward adaptation and evolution in our management. Every day that we're spending on disagreements about how to interpret a number is a day that we're really not working on that evolution in our management system. So again, we've got a really strong foundation here and great opportunity to build and improve together and set forward objectives together.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking at Haley. Do we have time for maybe a question from the audience? Does anyone have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't need the microphone.
Well, they're recording and everything.
Well, I'm going to give a little bit of pushback to this panel, because one of the things that I see when people come together like this, and industry leaders, environmental leaders, public officials, policymakers, is sort of to pack the buck down to the common people who don't really have time to engage in a meaningful way in these kinds of things. And I mean, I would say that that's your job, and I hope that you can come to us with some solutions about this, and not just say, use less toilet paper or whatever, or use less energy or something like that. I mean, we're a relatively small state. We're like the size of an average Midwest city. So I think our efforts would be best directed at the problems at hand. But my question is, what can we do to stop the bycatch of the trawler fleet? Fund, get the funding that we need to count fish stocks and regulate the fisheries accurately with industry funding. I don't really, and not just burdening the taxpayer and burdening the state, but that should be an industry-funded thing primarily, I think. And C, were we to come up with another, what kind of a fisheries method could be used to replace trawling that would employ more Alaskans, more fishermen, more boats, and generally, promote the value of our fish stocks.
I'm looking at our panel.
Yeah, thank you. I can speak to some of the work in the pollock fishery in particular. The Alaska pollock fishery is in the Bering Sea and in the Gulf of Alaska. It's a very abundant fishery. It's conservatively managed. It's managed within a cap over any take in the Bering Sea overall, and then also under stock assessment of that stock itself. And so a 2 million metric ton cap in all of the Bering Sea of removals is set in place as an additional ecosystem consideration, plus any removal of groundfish in the Bering Sea is done so with strong annual survey data, understanding how the age class structure is, what the health is of the stock overall moving through. So we've got really good information on the amount of removals that can occur, and still buffer again for scientific uncertainty, management uncertainty, just generally take a conservative approach. For example, in our fishery, the pollock fishery, the harvest rate is well under 15% on an annual basis, leaving more than 85% of the stock in the water. And there's a lot of ecosystem considerations in setting that already. With respect to individual practices, there's a ton of fantastic work that's evolved over the last 20 years. That fishery has a structure such that it's cooperative, and so groups of vessels are fishing together, delivering to a processor, and those vessels are sharing information. And as the decline in Chinook stocks coastwide occurred, and this has been going on for more than 10 years, it's put much more of a focus and urgency in that fleet on ensuring that they're doing everything they can with respect to avoidance. And so on the fishing grounds, there's a sharing of information around bycatch removals on each vessel basis. Have they interacted with bycatch or with salmon on the fishing grounds? That information is shared in order to help avoid areas. Plus the data is reported into voluntary additional data analysts, and the fleet signs up to obligate itself to close areas. And so if there's hotspots, we self-regulate with respect to choosing to share information and having in-season management that's really closing off areas to avoid. And then there's a lot of accountability at the government side as well, driving down and ensuring we're doing everything we can to avoid and bring down salmon bycatch numbers. I think more than 100,000 Chinook had been taken at a high. Last year it was 12,000 in the Bering Sea fishery. The reductions, the improvements have been tremendous, and they've been sustained. And every fisherman is considering how to better avoid salmon in every tow that they're making, and they've got incredible tools to be able to know what the results of that is. So high level of accountability, reporting through a public process, and then there are federally trained observers on every boat to verify, sample, and understand exactly what's happening in the trawl fishery. We've innovated gear, we cut a hole in the nets, and then work with lights and other physical measures to be able to help improve bycatch avoidance or ensuring that salmon aren't being trapped in the net at take. Everything that is taken is census, so 100% observer coverage with 100% accounting of those salmon. So I think.
Whoa. You said 100%? 100% observer coverage?
100 or 200% observer coverage in the Bering Sea. In the Gulf of Alaska, there's a partial coverage, which is observer coverage at a lower rate. It's been identified as an area where improvement certainly could be made.
What is 200% coverage?
2 observers
Okay.
on board, so that for vessels that are operating on a continuous basis, that you're not having sleeping interact or interfere with accountability and observer coverage.
In the Gulf, you said that improvements could be made.
Thank you. In the Gulf, you said improvements could be made. Could you describe that a little more, when improvements could be made? Because a lot of us would like to see improvements made.
In the Gulf of Alaska, there's smaller trawlers in that fishery. It's been really important to the community of Kodiak. There's a lot of local-based boats there. And the scale isn't as big as the Bering Sea, so the economics are challenging generally in many of the mixed stock and groundfish fisheries in Kodiak. Due to that, the management that is in place there is less sophisticated and less expensive than that has been integrated into the Bering Sea management. And that's what's led to what we call partial coverage. And so it's not 100% observer coverage. There's not an observer on board each boat every day. There's a partial program, and then the amount of coverage that occurs there is based on a science-based approach of looking at variability in those fisheries and what kind of and quality of information is necessary to inform estimates and management decisions. And the partial coverage has resulted in, I think, 30 to 40% lately coverage in the trawl fishery in the Gulf of Alaska. In order to increase that, it needs to be funded. And what is the additional information that would come from increasing that observer rate relative to the cost and burden overall? That is what is just generally being considered and debated. But there was a state of Alaska bycatch task force that was put together, and one of their recommendations was this, to look at increased observer coverage in the Gulf of Alaska.
So one of the things that I feel needs to happen in the council process, the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council process, is that, from what I understand, like they meet 4 times a year, but their ability to create change is they're not able to just decide something at a meeting and then it's implemented right away. The timeline is always very far out, and I think if the council could somehow be more responsive and respond to abundance levels in species that are being impacted, I think that could make a huge difference. And I'm sad that abundance-based management has to be on the table again in a lawsuit for halibut ABM, abundance-based management, that somehow that got taken away. And that was one way that the council could be more responsive. But I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something that my organization has really been organizing hard around. Right now, because this administration is running out, we're kind of looking at it maybe not going through, but at least the conversation was started around rewriting some of the national standards guidelines in a meaningful way. The national standards guidelines define how the councils around the country do their work. And in lieu of the Magnuson-Stevens Act being rewritten and reauthorized, the national standards guidelines are something that can change under an advance notice of proposed rulemaking under NOAA. And Janet Coit of NOAA actually called for this rulemaking for national standards 6, 8, and 9 that pertain to allocation, bycatch, and communities. And we've been hoping that the rewriting of these guidelines, standards guidelines, could change in ways that could really help and make the council more responsive to fish not returning to rivers in Alaska so that they can complete their life cycle. And so if it does manage to move before this administration is out, pay attention, please participate. I totally get what you said about the burden shouldn't be on the public. That it's our jobs, people who work in this space, but there are ways to weigh in a public comment period if it's called. So I just wanted to make sure that you at least had that on your radars.
8 minutes. Any more questions? Let's see. I'm just randomly going over here.
I'm new here, been here for 3 years and trying to wrap my head around a lot of this. I was wondering if each of you could maybe share, if you had a day with somebody, how would you educate them? Would you take them out to see something? Would you assign them a book? Would you send them to a website and say, read this whole website? Like, from each of your perspectives, what would you do to get started?
I know that my level of joy really goes off the charts when I get out into the field and I'm on a river, ideally seeing salmon moving. And so when I have felt the most connected to these issues and felt the passion for not making the same mistakes that have been made everywhere else in the world, it's being in the place. And I feel like in Alaska particularly, sharing, I just went dip netting a week or so ago, and that shared experience, like the giddiness when the fish start popping and everybody's getting fish, there's so much joy there that you protect what you love, and you have to have really positive associations with something to fight for it. And I understand the desire to not, for the public to not feel like they have to be like signing petitions for everything, but being scrappy about things that are important, I think, is part of our responsibility as citizens. And this stuff is so complicated that if we don't have voices pointing us towards where people are perceiving real problems, it's really easy to just be busy and not actually solving anything. So yeah, spending time with someone on a river, because that's where I get animated, and I think that's what really, that's where storytelling connects with people, is when you see a sparkle in somebody's eye. So yeah, get outside.
Where I would take someone is I would bring them down to a subsistence net in Naknek if they were Alaska resident only, because it would be illegal if not. Where I would start I would pick you up from the King Salmon Airport. My daughter would be in the car and she'd be telling you, we're gonna go get fish. She's about 3 years old. We'd drive down to the river, and what I'd really want someone to see is the amount of community members and the amount of children and the amount of families intergenerationally that are on that beach and that are all harvesting fish. They're all there sharing just this experience together and this love of this creature that comes back and nourishes them in physical, emotional, spiritual, social ways. Then after that, we'd pick the fish out of the net. We'd go back to our house and we'd go to the splitting table. And hopefully some of my wife's family would be there to tell you some wild stories of how life used to be in a region that has seen so much change over the last 100 years. And we would finish by sharing this incredible meal together, this wild fish that we've hand caught, and that means so much to so many in so different ways.
I wouldn't deter too much from what he just said. I mean, it's been probably the most powerful experiences to take somebody and have them get their hands in the water and touch the mud and feel the cold of the water. And you know, I've been really fortunate to take a lot of different individuals to my home, Dillingham, and share with them what's really important to me and my family. I think it's more powerful than me telling you, and you know, but there's at least some idea of what it could be like. I mean, some of you may remember former President Obama attending his travels, first sitting president, to visit Dillingham, walking Naknek Beach and having a coho melt on a shoe. You know, it's unique. I mean, it gave him a really different perspective of the fishery. But one of the cool experiences I had is bringing a couple folks to Naknek Beach, and you know, they weren't familiar with subsistence fishing for food, and you know, just hadn't seen sockeye salmon running along the shore in the water. And you know, as soon as the fish were hitting the net, they'd never seen anything like that. And said, "Are you going to sell this?" Well, no. I mean, we're going to eat this. I mean, this is my family harvesting. And put your hand on the cork line. Just feel the fish. You know, just kind of moving around, and you know, just feel it, versus just talking about it, or you know, and then after that, sharing the meal and you know, enjoying that full experience. So, you know, in our operation too, whether it's our long line fleet and some of our, you know, catcher processors, it too is just, you know, being able to share that moment with visitors about what it means to walk on deck and, you know, what these vessels do. There is that connection. I think it's really powerful. So
I'm going to keep it short and just say feasting together, because tasting is believing. You know, it's like the food sort of helps complete the whole connection, you know, to the thoughts and words.
I think obviously if you could get someone to the fishing grounds, to the fishing vessels, to see, you know, the fishermen at work in their craft in that moment would be, you know, of course, the best situation. You know, logistically, a lot of that's not actually possible for someone, you know, in the lower 48. You're trying to explain, you know, sustainable seafood from Alaska. You know, I'm fortunate that we are able to bring customers to our processing facility, and we get them in there, we get them all smocked up, and the one thing I always do is I make them pick the fish up right off the line, a beautiful skinless, boneless Alaska cod fillet, and I say, smell it. And I say, get your nose as close to that fish as possible, and they smell it, and they say, I can't smell anything. And I say, that is quality fish right there. It should never smell. So that's something that I have the privilege to do, but I think in today's world, if you have somebody that's so far away from Alaska, logistically can't do it, it's going to be about positive media. And I think the video content, we need to always be better at it, collect it, put it out there in a positive light. I think there's been great documentaries from Bristol Bay as of late, especially with the Pebble Mine push, but positive fishing videos, pictures showing the landscape of Alaska and what these hardworking fishermen and fisherwomen are doing out there. I just think that's going to be the most impactful is anything visual you can put in front of them. You know, and of course the fish, the quality of it.
Yeah, I would just urge building confidence in what in Alaska seafood and the Alaska seafood economies that so many of our communities rely on and depend on. I mean, really that income is critical towards supporting the ability for communities to continue to exist and to support schools and just the foundation of many economies. And so if there's a question or concern, it's important to really dig in and understand. and get context to be able to, again, refuel confidence in process, and then identifying if there's a gap, what is it, and what's the best resource or approach to fill it. I think that there's great reason to have pride in the history of Alaska's fisheries management, learning from mistakes, improving, really strong investment in data monitoring, accountability, transparency, and fishermen are conservationists. Fishermen don't want to see the resource that they depend on depleted. And so I just ask that we recognize a lot of the successes in these fisheries while we continue to work on adaptation and improvement.
And it looks like that's time for us. Thank you so much to our panel. Please join me in thanking them. And thanks to Wild Alaska Company. And thanks to all of you. I know we'll have a chance to I'll have a chance to give this to Arron, actually.
All right. I just wanted to reiterate the thank you to the panelists, and say to all of you, thank you for your participation as well. These conversations are not easy. They're not supposed to be easy, but they're incredibly critical for the future. It's important that we're challenging each other, and that we're embracing public dialogue, and that we're working through these issues together. Having had the privilege to sell wild Alaskan seafood across the entire country, I can tell you that there's a lot of external pressure on Alaska, and the panelists got into some of that. So I think it's so critical that Alaska remains united and works through these issues. And that doesn't mean we're all going to agree. That doesn't mean we're going to do everything perfectly, or that we're not going to make mistakes. But again, going back to trying collectively not to do anything that looks too stupid 10,000 years from now necessitates these type of discussions. This is our first, as you all know, event in this series, the Live Wild educational series. We're looking forward to doing more of these in Alaska and outside of Alaska involving consumers of Alaskan seafood. To the community members in Alaska, we really welcome your feedback. We want to know who to put on future panels. We want to know which issues you want to have discussed in public dialogue and discourse. So we have email address on our flyer. We're pretty easy to get a hold of. We monitor social media quite actively, so we see that feedback, even if it's not necessarily directed to us. We're reading it, and we're iterating. In the spirit of public dialogue, I also wanted to invite everyone down to the Broken Oar. We're going to feed the Wild Alaskan employees that are here, but we also have some beer on tap for everyone else that would like to join us on the spit on the Broken Oar to continue this discussion in a slightly less formal and socially lubricated fashion. So you're all invited. First drink is on Wild Alaskan for those over 21 or over. Thank you again, and just again a huge thank you to my sister Haley Kallenberg, who organized this. Thank you for all the panelists and all the community members. Live wild, everyone. We'll see you.